God bless you. We are so excited that you visited us today. Listen, we believe that it was God's divine hand that led you to be viewing this video right now. So listen, this is what we know. There's a word from God for you right here, right now. So open your heart, open your mind, open your heart, and let's hear the word from the Lord. Come on, let's go in the sanctuary. Amen. Listen, this week we continue the series of sermons we've been preaching and teaching together under the general rubric of reset, because this isn't working. This week's installment is reset your relationships. I want you to remember, reset simply means to set again or to set differently. You know, with our relationships, we often forget that who we are connected to matters. Your relationships will literally define the quality of your life. And in many cases, your relationships will define who you are and who you are becoming. Sometimes our relationships will enhance us. Sometimes our relationships will limit us. I want you to understand, motivational speaker Jim Rohn famously said, "You are the average of the 5 people who you spend the most time with." Think about that for a second. The 5 people you spend the most time with, you're the average of them. Those are the 5 people that you come in contact with the most, the 5 people you talk to on the phone the most, the 5 people you interact with on social media the most. You become the average of them. And if you look around, many of us didn't pick those 5 people to determine who we were going to be. Listen, this is backed up by science. This isn't just some motivational speaker spouting off. In his book, New York Times bestseller Darren Hardy, in the book The Compound Effect, quotes Harvard researcher David McClellan, who says, "The people you habitually associate with will determine as much as 95% of your success or failure in life." Think about that. Not where you went to school, not how smart you are, not how God has gifted you, but the people you habitually, in other words, who you choose to spend your time with, who you choose to invest the resource that is most non-renewable, our time. The people that you spend that with and spend that on are the people who will decide up to 95% of your success or failure in life. It makes you really want to rethink who you spend time with and rethink how you spend time with them. My brothers and sisters, maybe it's time to reset some relationships. But I want to go a step further. That's not just motivational speaking. That's not just science research. That's actually biblical. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, Paul writes these simple words: "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." In other words, Paul is saying, no matter who you are, who you spend time with will affect you. No matter who you are with will influence the direction that you go in. You can be a good person and end up in the wrong place simply because of the people who you are with. You can have good morals and end up having them go in the wrong direction simply because you're surrounded with bad company. My brothers and sisters, I want you to look at who you are and look at who you want to become, and then consider maybe it's time to reset, rethink, and reevaluate some relationships. I'm gonna prove it to you. You know, it's one of those things that just is commonplace and it makes perfect sense. I remember when I was growing up. You remember growing up when kids used to go outside? You know, back in the day, before you just would sit on the PlayStation 5 and be on your headset with all your friends, you'd actually go outside and see them. Anytime I wanted to go to a friend's house, or anytime I wanted to go out with some folk, this is the question my mother would ask me: who all gonna be there? She wanted to know who was going to be there, and in most cases needed to meet them and their parents before I could go. She understood that being around the wrong people could lead you to being in the wrong places. And I want you to understand that no matter how well you were raised, no matter what choices you made, if you wind up around the wrong people at the wrong time, you will wind up in the wrong place. How many of you remember the movie Menace to Society? Y'all remember Kane and O-Dog? Now, they wasn't exactly pillars of the community, but if you remember how the movie opens, my man Kane winds up in trouble because O-Dog is a hothead that goes off. And now Kane is on the hook for something that O-Dog did. O-Dog, while neither one of them were perfect, drug Kane down further than Kane was prepared to go. And I want you to understand there will be times in life when the people that you're around will not be moving in the same direction as you. And because you're connected to them, you will get drugged into their stuff. How many times Have you wound up in some mess that wasn't of your making? How many times have you wound up in some mess because your good girlfriend was in some mess, because your homeboy was in some mess? How many times have you wound up circling the block looking for somebody that you didn't know about or care about, but you was down for the cause? How many times you been like, girl, we gonna go get his tires tonight? You don't know that man, but y'all was together and you're the average of the 5 you're with. If you with 5 broke folk, you're gonna be the 5th one. If you with 5 rich folk, you got a chance to be the 5th one. If you with 5 people who like to move up in life, you're bound to be one of the 5 that's moving up. But if you're with 5 people that are trying to go down, you're likely to go down with them. If you're with 5 people who are trying to stay stuck, you're likely to stay stuck with them. I want you to know, as we're closing out this year, this is the season to evaluate the relationships that you're in. This is the season to evaluate how you're spending your time and who you're spending your time with. It may be time to spend more time with some folks and less time with others. It may be time to shift your circle of friends so that you can shift where you're going next year. But here's the deciding factor. The deciding factor is, where do you want to go next? What do you want to have next? And too many of us, watch this, you haven't looked around to notice that what you said you wanted and what all of your friends have is not the same thing. Let me help you. If you hang out with folk and all of y'all are in the same place and you're trying to figure out how to get out, none of y'all know the answer because y'all are all in the same place. You have to choose where you're trying to go. And here's the thing about relationships. We fall into them sometimes in the wrong way. Sometimes we fall into them out of comfort. Sometimes we fall into them out of convenience, but we should always be falling into them out of calling. Let me show you. Sometimes we fall into them out of comfort. I've just known these folk all my life. We've been friends since back in the day. We go back like spinal cords and rocking chairs. You just know them, so you've always been around them. So it's comfortable to be around them. You don't challenge them and they don't challenge you. But here's the problem. If you don't challenge them and they don't challenge you, you'll never rise beyond where you are. Sometimes we do it out of convenience. Well, it's just easy. They just right here. And here's the problem with convenience. Everything that's convenient isn't good for you. Let me help you out. The 7-Eleven down the street is a convenience store. It is centrally located. I can go to it whenever I want to. I can get what they have. But here's the problem. If I stay in the convenience store, all I'm going to have is Slurpees and chips. Sometimes you got to make your way so that you can have better out of life. Sometimes you got to inconvenience yourself to move to where you're trying to be. But this season, I want you to understand, your relationships can't be based on comfort. They can't be based on convenience. They've got to be based on calling. They have to align with where God is trying to move you. God, watch this, is not going to leave you friendless. Some of us stay in comfort and convenience because we think, if I don't have them, I'm not going to have nobody. Let me explain something to you. God will add or subtract the people that you need or the people that you don't need to keep you moving in the right direction. And here's the thing you got to understand. Everybody ain't going where God is calling you. I want to say that again. Everybody is not going where God is calling you. And here's the thing. Everybody doesn't even want to go where God is calling you. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go. That's not a knock on them. It's a revelation to you. Let me help somebody. Just because they don't want to go doesn't mean that you have to stay. It's not a knock on them. It's a revelation to you. It's been revealed that maybe it's time to shift some things. It's been revealed that maybe some new friends are coming. It's been revealed that maybe some relationships have to come, some relationships have to go, and some have to be reset. I'm going to show it to you in the Bible. Look at Jesus. In Matthew, the 16th chapter, verses 21 through 23, these are the words that we find. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised from the dead. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but setting your mind on the things of men. When Jesus revealed his calling, Peter couldn't handle it. It wasn't because Peter didn't love Jesus. If you want the truth, Peter loved Jesus so much that Peter was willing to fight for Jesus, die for Jesus. But he wanted to protect Jesus from what God was calling Jesus to. I want you to understand, everybody holding you back is not necessarily doing it because they're a hater. Sometimes they're doing it because they love you and they're afraid for you. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't move forward anyhow. Jesus wanted Peter to understand, I know you're trying to protect me, but my calling is greater than your protection. God will protect me because where God is leading me, where God is taking me, God will make a way for me. Everyone cannot handle where you are going. I want you to hear me. Everyone can't handle where you're going. Everybody can't handle what God is trying to do in your life. Everybody can't handle that you're being elevated. Everybody can't handle that you're changing. Everybody can't handle that you're shifting. Everybody can't handle that you don't like what you used to like and that you like some different things now and you want to move in some different directions now. Everybody can't handle that, but you got to let folk know that you can't stand between me and my destiny. You can't stand between me and what God is calling me to. You can't stand between me and what God is trying to do in my life. Jesus let Peter know that what he was called to was greater than their friendship, and he would have to move him if need be. Your calling is paramount in your life. What God is trying to do with you, what God is trying to bring you to, what God is trying to bring you through is the most important thing. I need you to know that fulfilling the call on your life may require the resetting of relationships. Sometimes you've got to say, this is as far as we can go. And here's the thing. If God is calling you further, don't stop here. The Bible tells us in the book of Genesis of a man named Abraham. Abraham is who God decided that he was going to start his covenant with, and he would make him the father of many nations. And when God calls Abraham, God tells Abraham, I need you to leave your father's house. I need you to leave your father's land and go to a place that I will show you. And Abraham decides to take his boy Lot with him. Now look what the Bible says. They've been going, they've been doing well. They've been walking in the call that God has put on Abraham's life. But then it gets to a point where a decision has to be made. Genesis chapter 13. Verses 5 through 12 read as follows. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's herders. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any of this fighting between you and me, or between your people and my people, because we're close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. In other words, listen, it goes further. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of Jordan towards the Zor was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of Jordan and set out towards the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, and Lot lived in the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. What I want you to understand is that the Lord had blessed them enough where they got to the point where they had to part ways. Every parting of ways is not necessarily a bad thing. They had to reset the nature of their relationship. They had gotten far enough that they had started fighting. Let me help you out. You don't need to be fighting with your friends all the time. You don't need to be around folks where your friends can't be around their friends because they always scuffling, they always getting in stuff, and now y'all in the middle of it, and now y'all scuffling and getting in stuff. Maybe you've been blessed through this season to get to this season, but now you move differently in another season. When Abram and Lot split, they didn't split mad. They split because they had prospered enough to be able to say, we walk the road together as far as we can go. When you reset some relationships, that's going to mean from time to time, somebody's going to have to go left and somebody's going to have to go right, and you're just going to have to let that be. It's not always easy. It's not always fun, but you got to remember there are seasons in life, and for everything there is a season. The season for Lot and Abram had passed, so it was time for them to move on. There will be times in your life when you are going to outgrow folk. You are going to outlive folk. You are going to go in different directions. You're going to develop different interests. You're going to have different callings on your life. And if you try to hold on to them indefinitely, when God has put a period, don't you put a comma. And where God has put a comma, don't you put a period. But when it comes to resetting relationships, you've got to understand that Abram and Lot, their season together had come to an end, and they went in different directions, and they were both fine. I want to help you. You will be fine without them, and they will be fine without you. If it's time to reset, it's time to reset. Because let me show you, every separation isn't forever. Look at the Apostle Paul and his friend John Mark. In the Bible, in Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 41, Paul and John Mark, they, like Lot and Abram, have to separate. Look what the Bible tells us. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are. Now, Barnabas wanted to take with them John called Mark, John Mark. But Paul thought it best not to take with them the one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. And he went to Syria and Cilicia and strengthened the churches. Understand what happens. Barnabas and Paul don't get down anymore because John Mark flaked out on them before. And Paul was like, look, where we going, we can't take him with us. Because he flaked out before, he'll flake out again. So I'm going to reset this relationship. He can't come. And here's the problem. Barnabas says, he's a good dude. He should come. So they wind up going in different directions over somebody who was not meant to go where they were going. I want you to understand, John moved in his direction with Barnabas. Paul moved in his direction with Silas. And Paul and Silas did good work. Barnabas and John Mark did good work, but they did it separately because they couldn't get along. When you can't get along, it's time to move on. But here's the thing. Every breakup doesn't mean that it can't be reconnected. I want you to understand that sometimes a reset means that you all have grown and gotten past some stuff, and some folk that you had to separate from, it may be time to come back together. Look what the Bible tells us in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 through 11. Paul calls for a reconciliation here. He says, do your best to come to me soon, for Demas, who is in love with the present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Luke only is with me. Go get John Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful for me in ministry. That's what I want you to understand. In resetting the relationship that was severed was later reconnected. Every reset doesn't have to be permanent. There can come a time when you two can come back together. There can come a time when you've proven yourself, they've proven themselves. You both have grown, and now you're able to say, listen, what's in the past was in the past, and what God is calling us to is greater than what God had called us to. Remember, your past is in the past, your future is in the future, but in the present, the past may get shifted to create the future. You've got to understand that Paul said, I can be reconciled because John Mark, maybe I was a little hasty. He couldn't go with me then, but he can go with me now. There may be some folk who couldn't go with you then, but they can go with you now. You might have to bring some folk back to the circle who had gotten put out the circle simply because you've grown, they've grown, and things have shifted so you can reset that relationship. Listen, there are three types of people that you need with you. When you're putting together your circle, you need three types of people to be in that 5 people that you spend the most time with. You need someone who will make you better, someone who will tell you the truth, and someone who will remind you of who God called you to be. You need someone who will make you better, somebody who will lift you up. The Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. You cannot always be the smartest person in the room. The limit on your destiny, the limit on what God is calling you to, may be your need to be smarter than everybody else. It may be your need to be number one. You have to have some folk around you that are smarter than you, that are better than you, because they may be smarter at you than this, and you're smarter than them at that, and you come together and you sharpen them in what you're good at, and they sharpen you in what they're good at, and together you two raise the average of your circle. You've got to have some folk around you that make you better. If you're always the smartest person in the room, go to another room. You need people who will make you better. You need people who will lift you from where you are to where God is trying to get you to be. Second group of people you need, remember, you need some folk that'll make you better, but you need some folk that'll tell you the truth. You need some folk that'll tell you the truth no matter what. This is what the Bible tells us, Proverbs chapter 27, verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. In this book of wisdom, it's simply saying your friend may hurt your feelings to tell you the truth. And some of us lose friends because they told us the truth. Some of us lose friends because our friends wouldn't go along to get along. They told us the truth to try to make us better, and we got mad because we didn't want to hear it. Let me tell you something. If nobody can tell you the truth, you will always be surrounded by liars. You think there's a whole bunch of folk lying to you and lying around you? If no one can tell you the truth, if nobody has permission to call you on your stuff, if nobody has permission to say that's simply not the case, you will be surrounded by liars and sycophants who are only there to make you feel better. And that is not good for anybody. It simply is not. You need some folk that will tell you when you're wrong, that will tell you when you messed up. The Bible tells in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 7, Nathan, the prophet, had to come to King David and tell him, listen, so the Lord sent Nathan to David. Nathan came to him and said, there were two men in a certain city. One was rich and the other one was poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cows, but the poor man had only one little female lamb that he brought. He raised her and she grew up in his home with his children. She would eat his food and drink from his cup. She rested in his arms like it was a daughter. Now a visitor came to the rich man. The rich man thought it would be a pity to take one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler. So he took the poor man's lamb and prepared her for the traveler. David burned with anger against the man. I solemnly swear, as the Lord lives, he said to Nathan, the man who did this certainly deserves to die, and he must pay back 4 times the price for the lamb because he did this and had no pity. And Nathan responded to David, you are the man. Nathan was explaining to David, this is after David had cheated on his wife and gotten this woman named Bathsheba pregnant, who was the wife of another man, a Hittite named Uriah. Nathan was telling him, you did this. This is exactly what you did. And here's the problem. David's the king. David had already put somebody to death over this. He could have done the same thing to Nathan, but he doesn't. David falls down in sackcloth and ashes and repents before God because he had somebody he was in relationship with who could tell him the truth. If no one can tell you the truth, you will always live a lie. If no one can tell you the truth, you will never get better. If no one can tell you the truth, you'll never be who God is calling you to be, because you'll always believe you're better than you are because no one will tell you the truth. You need some people to make you better. You need some people to tell you the truth, but you also need some people who will remind you who you are. My brothers and sisters, there will be times in life when we'll get lost, We'll lose our way, we'll lose ourselves, we'll lose our confidence, we'll lose our swagger. There are times that we will get lost. Things will happen and we will fall apart. Things will happen and we will fall down. There will be times that we will lose that we are masterpieces, that we are God's handiwork, that God has a call on each and every one of our lives, that God has positioned us to do things and pivoted us to do things. And sometimes we will fall down. Disappointment will get to us. Discouragement will wrap us up and we will fall apart. You need some people who will remind you in those moments of who you are. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. Paul writes to his mentee Timothy these words: I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors with a clear conscience, as I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day. As I remember your tears, I long to see you, that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. For this reason, I want to remind you to stir up the gifts that God has given you, which came through the spirit of me laying on my hands. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power of love and of self-control. Timothy was terrified and falling apart at what God was calling him to. And Paul had to remind him, you are not fearful. You are wonderfully made. You are not a failure. You are gifted in many ways. You have been gifted with faith through generations. You are not who you think you are. You are not that person crying in the mirror. You are God's called son. So stir up those gifts that are in you. You need some people in your life. You need some folk that'll make you better. You need some folk that'll tell you the truth. And you need some folk who will remind you of who you are. This season is not the season to just keep going. Reset. Set it again. Set it differently. Reset your relationships, because now is the season that God is going to surround you with the people you need. My brothers and my sisters, it's time to reset your relationships. Hey, I hope that sermon enlivened your mind, opened your heart, and moved you closer to God. If the sermon had an impact on you, why don't you consider the following? Try becoming a part of the St. Paul family. We'd love to have you. To be a part of our family, just join us here every week and watch our broadcast. Follow us on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. All you got to do is come and join us, or go to our website and keep up with all that's going on. We want to be connected to you, and we want you to be connected to us. Also, share this word. All you got to do, copy the link, send it to friends, send it to family, post it on your social media. We want to do the kingdom business of spreading the word of God as far and wide as we can, and you can help us with that. Also, would you consider supporting the St. Paul Ministries? We'd love to have your support. It doesn't matter how much you give. You can give a lot, you can give a little, whatever the Lord leads your heart to, because we're just trying to spread the word of God so that people can get closer to God and have the lives that he intended. If you want to support our ministry, just go to www.stpaulOxonhill.org and press the Give tab. Listen, we love you. We're glad you were here. And now it's time for the Williams Weekly Challenge. The Bible tells us in the book of James to not only be hearers of the word, but also doers of the word. This week for the Williams Weekly Challenge, I want to challenge you to reset your relationships. Let me ask you a question. If you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, who are your 5? Are they lifting you up, or are they pulling you down? Are they moving you towards your calling, or are they pulling you away from what you know God is calling you to do? This week, I want you to examine your relationships and figure out, are these the 5 I should have, or is God going to send me a new 5? This week for the Williams Weekly Challenge, I want you to reset your relationships. I love you. God bless you. And we'll see you next time.